What's up, guys, and welcome back to the infamous project. Today is a super exciting episode, well, at least for me. For me and for Justin, who is the owner of this 1990 Black Notch sitting here behind me, aka the Black Notch Project, and it has been a little bit of a journey. However, we're finally going to hit a major milestone, and that milestone is getting this Prestige built 363 with a YSI blower underneath and into the engine bay.
Fill it with a O-ring.
It does look kind of jankety, doesn't it?
It looks like shit. So let me find that.
All right. Well, folks, here we are. Prestige motor finally showed up after how many months?
Too many.
So we're here, and actually Justin already opened up this box. And one interesting thing that I noticed when he sent me pictures was the outlet of the blower facing straight. A lot of you small block guys would be used to the fact of these blowers having a 90 here so that you could easily get from here to your throttle body. Now, for whatever reason, something was lost in translation, assumptions of intercooling. However, even if you were intercooled, normally this wouldn't happen, or you'd probably want a driver's side mounted blower so that you could run your piping down and around your lower radiator support, back up over out your inner fender and into the main throttle body there. So we're just kind of, well, what's the ordeal? So long story short, we actually need to take this head unit off. It's going to get sent back to Vortech, and then we're going to get the proper housing and unit so that we can get the curve here that we need to be able to go straight to the throttle body, which that is a massive, how many millimeters is this?
105.
So we need to step from whatever this is and get something super cool ballooned up and made to get to that throttle body, because there will not be an intercooler on the setup, and there wasn't on the dyno, right?
No.
They just had their own contraption when they had it on there and made all the power, and that's why Justin went with the YSI, so you didn't have to worry about intercooling, because at this stage you're extremely efficient with all the boosts that you're making. So there you are, folks, a little sneak peek. That's right, I said it's actually going to be going from underneath, and that is because we want to mitigate the chances of potentially scratching that beautiful Tiffany Blue engine bay. Now, not all of you would agree that it's beautiful, but you know what? It's Justin's car, and Justin's going to get what Justin wants. So we got to be pretty careful on what we're doing here, and going to get the car kind of jacked up. We're probably going to use, I could use the lift and then set things down on the lift. However, I would have to play quite a bit in terms of the game musical cars, and I don't know if I want to do that. I think I can actually roll the car out, use the cherry picker, get this guy lifted up, hopefully enough to be able to slide that motor in from underneath. So that is what we're going to attempt. The other reason for going on the underside are these long tube headers, and they are a really nice piece. However, being a really nice piece and being long tubes, they can be a serious pain when it comes to distance and clearance by the frame rails. We know they fit because they were already on his old motor that was in this car. So fitment isn't the problem, it's just trying to maneuver and get them in. On Justin's notch, I've got all of his header pieces, because they're definitely not together, here on the ground, and going to be trying to get those mocked up onto the motor so that way everything is as complete as possible when we go to roll this thing underneath. One thing that we need to make sure of is that everything that needs to be on the firewall is in place. So I've actually started with the brake booster, master cylinder, hydraulic clutch pedal install. Guys, I tried to get that on camera, but it was so dark in the car, And honestly, it's pretty straightforward. Maybe when I can get a light, I'll try and wind back to this footage and put something in there just to kind of show you guys. The install instructions are super easy. So that is what that braided line is coming through the firewall there. We have the throttle cable and then heater box. I need to put a new grommet down on the bottom there, so before I finish bolting that on all the way. But right now I'm actually going to stick the caster camber plates back on, and he had a standard set, as you can see here. This one's all disassembled. This is the passenger side, and we've got our maker's scuff plates now that the engine bay is all nice and painted up. I want to make sure that he's got scuff plates so that we don't mess up the paint any more than we need to. So that is sort of the name of the game. This gives you, I guess, a little bit more perspective, a close-up of the engine bay. You can see I've got the hood to firewall liner here, which is a pet peeve of mine. For those of you that follow me regularly, you'd know I hate it when this doesn't get reinstalled. So anyways, let's get this caster camber plate sorted. I got my mallet so that I could, there we go, get that tap through. Alright guys, so we're actually going to have to get the car up about 27 inches. That's a pretty good amount, but I think we should be able to do it with the cherry picker. The motor's actually going to have to kind of go in sideways here because the lower radiator support is even lower. So the radiator support's only, 7.5 inches off the ground, which would mean, alright, have to go like 30 inches up in the air to be able to slide it down that way. But we went Jerry's Coyote, kind of went in through here and then turned the motor once it was underneath the car. Alright guys, so motor's in. It is humid as hell out here today, and it's supposed to rain the next couple days, so that probably explains that. But motor went in pretty easily, with the exception of I had to take the blower off again, just because that between that bracket and the long tube on this side, there was just no snaking that in between the frame rails. So other than that, struts are bolted up into place, use of a jack, use of some wood, and right, we got it up through the underside without bumping radiator supports or frame rails or strut towers or firewalls or any of that stuff. So I'm going to go ahead now, even though that there's no rotors. I'm hoping there's enough clearance with no rotors, otherwise I might have an old set kicking around until the Brembos show up. But we want to get it back on its wheels so that way it can ride around on the ground on 4 wheels instead of being on jack stands, and we're one step closer. Not only am I overheating, the GoPro is overheating because it is that warm today. And just kind of plugging away on a few things here. Ran the throttle cable on the firewall there. I painted that up and got it black. Still need to mount the bracket. You can see that this intake sits pretty high here. Luckily, Justin is running a 2.5-inch cowl hood, so we should have the necessary clearance. Now, a few things to take note of as I've been mocking things up in place. The first one, as soon as I bolted the blower back on, I was actually trying to get it into position, and underneath here somewhere is the oil drain, and the piece of pipe that they had threaded in with the 90 on is too long and it was hitting the frame rail. So that's going to have to get modified in order to get the proper clearance, so that way we can connect the oil drain that goes back to the pan right there. Number two, which is a pretty standard thing whenever you put a passenger mount style blower on your Foxbody, is your radiator hose, right? So I've just kind of set this Fluidyne radiator, which he had in the car before. We are going to have to get an electric fan set up of sorts, as he was running the factory style clutch fan in his previous setup. So we're going to get that set up all nicely done and clean and tidy. And we're going to have to get most likely the crossover pipe, or just maybe a different, I don't know, maybe he'll go with the killer glass pipe. I think he wanted to do that when he saw it on my Stalker Vert. So we have that. Headers, I've been, you know, I had them mocked up in there. It didn't really allow me to get all the primaries bolted into place. And what I noticed was when I took them out, they had a mixture of these 12 points versus just a standard 6-point. And these guys, what I've learned, are actually a little bit wider than those. And I'm thinking we're just going to go for a full set of stainless 6-point like that, because that little bit of extra thickness or wideness of that bolt is definitely making things challenging trying to get all the primaries bolted onto the head. So we have that. Other than that, we got the hydraulic clutch cable here that's coming out of what would typically be the clutch cable hole. And what I'm thinking is that since this is actually going to be running a Holley dash, I'm going to kind of revert back to what the factory did when cars were automatic. So when cars were automatics, they actually used to run the speedo cable through where the clutch cable would be coming through for whatever reason, and they'd put a plug on the hole, which is typically used on a 5-speed car for the speedo cable. And I'm wondering if it's just, it was a rubber plug issue, like it was easier to plug that hole versus plug the clutch cable hole. So what I'm thinking is that our Holley Terminator X connections are literally right here. Okay, so there's 2 of them. And also got the 90s kind of mocked up here so I can figure out the fuel system. But what I want to do is make the wiring as neat and tidy as possible. So instead of coming out of this hole and running the wiring across, I'm almost thinking I'm just going to put the plug in there and keep that clean. I've already got a grommet for that hole in the firewall because we're not using any of that anymore because we came out of the cruise control area for all of our driver's side wiring. So I'm actually thinking maybe I'll pull the Terminator X wiring out of here, or maybe I will pull it out of this hole up here, and then that way it'll allow me to keep everything, you know, wiring and all that central of the bay and of the car and keep things nice and tidy. So last but not least, and I could have started off with this when we started with talking about the blower, is we're going to have some work ahead of us here. You can see this inlet is pretty set pretty far back. So we need to get from here to here, okay? And just think of the other Holley intake that we had. That guy was coming over here, so I couldn't even imagine what that piping would have looked like. So this is going to be interesting. Couple things to think about. Definitely not just plug and play and go. This car is actually going to be quite easy because we know that the motor, well, actually I take that back. All the intercooler plumbing is going to make things very challenging, depending if Chuck wants to drill into those freshly painted aprons or not. So got some thinking to do, some strategizing. So that pretty much goes through everything on Justin's car. It was a little bit of a struggle, but nothing catastrophic. And we managed to pull through and get it done before lunch. So now I get to move on and get the fuel lines on the back of the fuel rails ready for Chuck's motor, because once the Kenny Bell is on the top, there is no getting to the backs of those fuel rails. So gonna get that done. I'll just leave myself enough material so that I can get over towards the fuel pressure regulator and the Y junction that's coming off the main feed, and that way we'll be able to get his motor hopefully in this car tomorrow. At least that's the idea, which would be great, right? 2 motors in 2 days, and showing pretty good progress and major milestones for these 2 builds. So that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed seeing the motor going here and going through some of the obstacles and the challenges that we're going to face. And guys, that's part of the game, right? Whenever you're doing custom builds, there's going to be setbacks, there's going to be roadblocks, there's going to be frustration. Nothing is just cookie cutter, plug and play. Like if this car didn't have the intercooler, or actually it's not that it didn't have the intercooler, if it didn't have the shaved aprons, it would be a pretty much plug and play scenario. But you know what? These 3 cars right here definitely all had their own elements of custom in order to get them to where they need to be and across the finish line. So thanks for watching, guys. Like, subscribe, do all those things, share, and make sure to give your comments and feedbacks down below. And we'll see you here next time on the Infamous Project.